This is the Sabre Coach Kate podcast, where I highlight the great thinkers, athletes, and coaches in the dynamic sport of Olympic fencing.
Guard. Boy,
Today's episode is the story of David Sach, a man who has represented fencing on 2 continents, and who you probably know best as the Head Assigner of Sabre at most NACs. You know, the guy with the accent at the big table in the middle of the venue. You just had no idea who he really is. David holds elite status in the fencing trifecta of competitor, coach, and referee. As a fencer, he won a number of cadet, junior, and senior national titles, including a run of 5 back-to-back junior national championships, 2 silver individual medals, and a team gold at the Commonwealth Games. As a coach, he served as a British fencing world-class performance pathway sabre coach and has helped produce several national champions, World Cup medalists, a cadet world champion, and Olympians. And as a referee, he has earned an FIE license, which allowed him to work a couple of senior world championships and the 2008 Olympics. He is currently the Director of Operations at Boston Fencing Club, one of the oldest in the country, and the head fencing coach at Tufts University. Tune in today to hear him tell you stories about his international life as an athlete, coach, and referee. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sabre Coach Kate podcast. I am delighted to have my guest, David Sach, here with me today. David, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed for my podcast.
Kate, not a problem. Thanks for having me on.
Well, let's start off with the question that I always ask everybody at the beginning. How did you become a fencer, and what was it that appealed to you about our sport?
I actually started fencing in high school, mainly because I didn't want to do cross-country running. So it was a choice between going outside in the cold and running or staying indoors and doing a sport. And I was like, oh, sword fighting, that sounds cool.
Indoor, not raining, good.
Not raining, not cold, not involving a 2-mile run. I'll do that. And that's actually how I started. And I really enjoyed it. And I did it at lunch times because the school, when I was young, didn't offer it as an activity except like in lunch times and after school.
Okay.
And so I started that, and it was I really enjoyed it.
And what was it in particular that you enjoyed? I mean, you said, oh, sword fighting, but was there some aspect that, I mean, besides the indoor part, like the athleticism, or it made you feel like a pirate?
No, I mean, I enjoyed the competitive nature of it. I enjoyed it as a one-on-one sport where you were trying to hit the other person. You were accountable for your mistakes rather than a team environment at the time. I really enjoyed the one-on-one aspect. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it was something different, something I'd never seen before. It was new. And so I wanted to try it.
Well, and you're a saber fencer. Did you always fence saber, or did you have to start on another weapon?
No, we had to start on foil. All the kids at my school started on foil. But needless to say, my point control was not great. And so it wasn't long. It was about 1 year to 2 years of foil before I swapped to saber. Okay. And I was about 13, 14 when I swapped. And I started fencing about 11.
Okay.
I really took to saber. Like I was already basically fencing saber with a foil. I just wasn't doing very well. So when I changed to saber, it just felt right.
Well, and you did have quite a few successes in your fencing career because you found that weapon that felt right. But before we get to that, tell me about your coaches and other people who influenced your fencing.
I had a great coach. His name was Mike Matthews. He was an old Polish saber fencer from back in the day, and he moved to the UK, I think sometime around the late 1960s, early 1970s. And he was luckily the high school coach of my school. He was one of several. My school was very into fencing at the time. And his dedication to sport and his approach to it really got me interested in it and got me good to a degree. And that involved, winning events and traveling. And he was a big influence in my fencing.
You said that your school was big into fencing. What school was it, and why was fencing so popular there?
Well, there's an old British public school. It was Brentwood School in Essex, and there's quite a few now. The public schools fencing championships in the UK is one of the biggest fencing events in the world. Probably only second to last summer nationals, to be honest.
No kidding.
It's a 4-day event. It's a 4-day event with a couple of thousand fencers, and you compete all three weapons. It's a bit strange like that. You represent your school, and you do all three weapons, and points from all count towards the overall team trophy. And so I did a lot there. I just enjoyed it. It was just fun.
So how did you do when you competed in foil and épée?
I wasn't bad at foil. Épée, I had no patience whatsoever. And so that, I'm surprised. So I never had the patience to really set up or wait out my actions at épée. So I either won my épée fights really well, or I lost them really badly. There was no middle ground at épée.
Yeah, either take the charge at them approach or, and startle them.
Pretty much. It was either charge and hit them or get hit. There was no real middle ground.
Right.
But foil, I was okay. I mean, I was okay at foil when you could flick, when they got rid of flicking. Because effectively, flicking saber. When they removed flicking, that foil career, I feel, really died a slow, painful death.
I don't think you're the only one that felt that way.
I would imagine not. I mean, I think it's basically because you could fence saber with a foil and just flick instead of hit, so it was good fun. And I fenced foil actually up to into college, because the same way the schools, you often fence all three. If you were a good enough fencer at college, you often did all three because we didn't always have the people to do it.
Well, and what were you like as a fencer?
Oh, I was awful. I would be worse. I would hate to referee me.
Oh, really?
I was annoying. I was cocky. I was smug. I was all the things. If I was the referee, I'd be like, I don't want to deal with him. And that was true pretty much from when I made my first Worlds in the Mexico World Championships in '94, all my way through cadets and juniors. I hadn't grown up, and I was the annoying child. But I was quick and aggressive. I think probably is a good way to describe it. I didn't like to waste time. Relatively athletic, my hand was very fast. My hand was way faster than my feet. So I got myself out of trouble with my hand sometimes.
And how did your coach deal with you?
Well, he was old school Polish. So, I mean, basically just beat me until I did as I was told.
Okay. That's one way to do it.
There was a lot of you were doing it his way or you just weren't doing it at all. And I had an actually very good relationship with him. So I was probably worse to opponents and referees and people I didn't respect in a way, whereas I respected him. So I would do things if he told me to do them, and I would train the way he wanted me to train, because he got me to where I was.
Right.
And I think there was an element of just from my point of view, there's a level of respect towards him to say, okay, you've got me this far so far, I'll trust you with getting me to the next stage.
Obviously, he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, he was a good coach, and he was the British Olympic coach in '92 for the Barcelona Olympics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was a good saber coach. And he was a good Polish saber fencer back in the day. And so, I respected his opinion and would listen to what he told me to do. And we didn't have that many huge fights.
That many. Talk to me about your fencing career. You've already mentioned, traveling to Commonwealth Games and, this high school competition. What were some of the highlights of your fencing career?
Well, I think my first Worlds a junior and cadet was in Mexico when I was still relatively young. I think I was 15, 16 at the time. And that was my first Worlds, and that was a super great, really good fun trip. And I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the fencing at that level. I didn't really understand it yet, to be honest, because it was my first one. But it was the first one of, I think, 6 or 7 junior world championships I went to. Because I went to 5 or 6, because I went to Mexico, Paris, Belgium, Venezuela, Tenerife, were all junior worlds. So I had a long run in the British team. I won a national title for seniors. I won a national junior title 3 times. I had a lot of successes at the time that I don't think I appreciated at the time, that you look back on and think, actually, that was really good. But I think some of my best trips, Commonwealth Games in Malaysia in '98 was fantastic. Senior World Championships in Johannesburg and Cape Town in '97, '98 was great. So there was lots of individual ones now that you look back and say they were really good fun. And as an athlete, I think probably the Cape Town World Championships, the senior, and Probably the Mexico World Championships as my junior and cadets. My first one was probably still the two highlights, I think, for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you ever would have had the opportunity to travel like that had you not been a fencer?
Not to the level I traveled for fencing. I mean, I was lucky in the fact that I did cadets, juniors, and seniors all at the same time. So I had to travel. And I went to places that I'm not sure I would have ever have gone with my family. I mean, into Europe's not as different for people to have European holidays in the UK. So some of those I would have done anyway. But places like Mexico, Venezuela, Malaysia I went to for Commonwealth Games, Australia I went to for the Commonwealth Games. A lot of the really long-haul destinations I got to go to for fencing, and I was lucky in that regard. So I think my level of travel would have probably been similar, but I wouldn't have seen as many different interesting places.
And did you get a chance to actually visit these places? Because I know sometimes as a referee, you just see the airport and the venue, but you don't get a chance to sightsee. Did you have a chance to actually visit?
Yeah, because a lot of these was when I was fencing. And so fencing, you're only on 2 days out of 10 at the event. And so we often had organized, like in Mexico, we had an organized sightseeing trip out to see the Aztec pyramids, which I still remember to this day because it was really good fun and funny. In Cape Town, we did a trip out to see the penguins at Port Elizabeth. There were lots of things that you can do as an athlete that, because you're not working every day, that when you flip to being the referee, the trips aren't quite the same because you are then working every day.
Yes.
So then you have to decide to stay before or after the event if you really want to sightsee.
Right. You've mentioned the Commonwealth Games several times, and the ones in 1998, I think you had to fence your coach in the semifinal round. Was he the coach of the Brightman School or something like that?
James was, it was James Williams who I beat in the semis in 98, and he wasn't yet my coach. At that point, he was on the senior British team with me. He went on to coach at the school where I was also coaching at later. But he wasn't actually my coach, because Mike Matthews, who was my Polish coach, was still my coach at the time.
Okay.
I was actually his coach at the time as well, so that was quite an interesting scenario. It was a lot of the same people on the same teams who all fenced at the same clubs were getting high up in these events. And so it was really interesting to fence him because he'd been someone I'd looked up to, though, because James was someone I looked up to because he went to the 92, 96 and 2000 Olympic Games.
Oh, wow.
And so he was someone that I looked up to as this, fencing superstar kind of thing. So, and as a young 20-year-old, it was very interesting to fence him at that point in my career. But it was an interesting experience, but it wasn't a coach-pupil relationship. It was much more like oh my God, you're amazing, and relationship.
Well, and tell everybody the outcome of that match.
Well, I won that one. I can't remember the exact score, but I won and went on to the final of the Commonwealth Games, where I lost to another member of the British team, actually. He was also called Williams, but they weren't related. It's a guy called Ian Williams. So it was good. It was a close match. I think it was 15-13 from memory, but it was pretty close. And I remember saying to my coach at one point, do I need to fence again? Because the guy I was fencing was an Army PE instructor. So he was super fit. And I was like, if I give it all in this match, do I have to fence for third? And he's like, no, you're fine. So I was like, okay, I can just go flat out. I needed to because he was very fit at the time. And so that was good.
Well, and you said that the guy that you beat, that was someone that you really looked up to, and maybe I don't know if you were intimidated by him, but were impressed by his accomplishments. So how did you mentally overcome perhaps some of that, preconceived idea that he was going to win to actually pull out the win that day?
I don't know. I think I just went into it very much. I mean, I'd had a good day. I was fencing well. And I think part of it was just the belief in yourself at that point. And I think that's where it gets difficult for young fencers, because I think there's a difference between belief in yourself and arrogance. And I think one often drifts into the other. Definitely me. And so part of it was just like, I just believed I could win. And so there was no real mental approach to it, because I think I just went on treating it like any other fight, which I think is probably the best way to have done it. I think with the way things were then, you were fencing, people all the time who were, because I was already doing senior internationals, so you were already fencing people who were on a world stage way better, and so you often have to take that approach that when you go into any fight, you've got to believe you can win it. I think the experience I'd had of doing, junior and cadet worlds, senior worlds for 3-4 years at that point meant that fight, although he was a person I looked up to. He was someone I was still like, no, I can win this fight.
Mm-hmm. I like how they're called fights in Britain.
Yeah.
I think that's so much better than bout.
Well, I think it is. It is. You're fighting with the other person for the win. I mean, I think I like it as well. I think it's a good terminology.
Do British referees say? I mean, instead of fence, do they say fight or something like that? Isn't there was a time start the fight, or I forget what?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, because there was a time when they said play, which made no sense. It's like get ready, play, which made no sense to anybody. Now I think they're back to they're relatively generic on guard ready fence, and I think that's just where it is now. Okay. But yeah, we've gone through some interesting terminology.
I'm sure. In 2004, you were made the men's and women's Sabre team manager for Britain's under-20 team. What were your duties as team manager?
You basically was logistics as much as anything else. You were organising the travel for the team. You make sure you had hotel rooms. You were effectively chef de mission, so you'd deal with any problems when the fencing was happening. You'd register the teams, you'd check the teams in. There was just a lot of that stuff. You'd work the selection, you'd keep control of the rankings. So a lot of it was administration, to be honest.
Okay.
The part of the actual trip we didn't fly as a whole. We got to a point where everyone basically tried to meet at one airport if we could, because the UK is not gigantic. So we did group travel and everyone was on one plane. And then that way we met the other end. We had a bus that picked everyone up and we all went together as a team. I mean, you'd book restaurants for dinners and stuff. It was fairly mundane administrative stuff for probably 80% of it. And then 20% was if there was a problem at the event, if a kid missed a flight, what were you going to do to deal with it? Mm-hmm. And stuff like that. Okay. I mean, British fencing didn't have any money back in 2004. I mean, it doesn't now, but back then it definitely didn't have any money. And so you doubled up on roles quite a lot. So you'd have the female chaperone on the trip would also be one of the referees. Okay. If the manager could referee, it helped because he didn't have to pay 2 lots of airfare or 2 lots of hotel rooms. Mm-hmm. So a lot of roles were split amongst people on the trip. And so I often doubled up the refereeing with the team manager position because financially then we didn't have to take an extra person. Mm-hmm.
How did you learn how to be a team manager?
I think I'd done it for a lot of years. Like I'd been traveling on these trips for a lot of years and I started refereeing beforehand and seeing how they were done. But it was a little bit you just learn on the fly, to be honest. Yeah. The people who you took over from or people who'd done it before would often pass down information or let you know things that were good or, we always stayed in the same hotels, so you knew that you were just booking that hotel again the next year. Right. We often ate in the same restaurants we ate at when I was a member of the squad. Like, that's just a restaurant we always went to. There was a particular Chinese buffet restaurant, or Chinese restaurant in Budapest that we always walked to. I'm not sure it was the best restaurant in Budapest, but whatever. We went to this restaurant every year for probably I hate to think, 7-8 years.
Oh, my goodness.
A lot of it was just you were carrying on stuff you'd already done or things you'd already been doing or, it only really became different if one of the events moved.
Right.
Like the Women's Sabre used to be in Bilbao and it moved recently to Segovia, so that would mean you had to find a new hotel and you had to find new restaurants. But in general, the teams often do the same thing year in, year out. It's a case where it's not, fix it. Okay. And so a lot of it was learning on the fly, but also knowing stuff because you've done it before.
Right. I'm just getting this picture of this, these people going to the same Chinese buffet and the restaurant owners are like, oh, here they come.
Oh, I'm sure it was absolutely like that. I guarantee that's exactly what they walked in every year.
All right. Well, you did mention that you had that shared duty of team manager and refereeing. In 2004, you got your FIU refereeing license. So how did that all work? Yeah. Would you do the logistics of the manager position before the trip, I imagine, and then just worked all day as a referee? How did you juggle the time?
Pretty much. Actually, when you're actually at an international event, the refereeing level, the amount of time you have to referee is not as bad as actually a NAC, to be honest. Oh. You get, you're not working necessarily every round of the 64. You're not necessarily, you have time off in between the 2 defences. There are breaks between the rounds, which means you can talk to the fences and talk to coaches and see how it's going. It's timetabled a bit better, is the honest answer at international. So there's more time for people to talk, know where people are. If there's a 64 bout, likely there's on 8 or 10 strips and, there's 4 rounds on that strip and you might have 2 of them. because there's lots of referees. Juggling wasn't particularly difficult to juggle those two roles, just with time constraints at the events. And then the longer you went, the later I went in my FIA refereeing career, the less I had to referee. Sometimes I was on the DTs. And then when you get put on the direct targeting or bout committee for Americans, you have more time to walk around and see what's going on.
Right.
And so that helped a bit as well. But it was bits and pieces like that. So it was really just juggling your time a bit. It wasn't actually as bad as it sounds, just because the events were structured and timetabled in a good way.
Got it. Do you have an interesting story from your international refereeing experience?
Oh my God, probably. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of a PG-13 one. I mean, we had a lot of fun. There was a lot of like people go out and have meals together, and you get with a group of people, especially when you start doing the senior World Cup circuit, because they're hired by the FIE, so you see the same people quite regularly. Especially if you're doing the Worlds as well. So you spend 10 days with these people, so you make really good friendships with the people you're at the Worlds with. And I had a great time. I mean, I refereed at some Worlds, and we had a really good time. It was my first World Championships I refereed at. One of my athletes, who I was co-coaching with, my coach at the time, won the Cadet World Championships.
Oh, wow.
And so that was really and like the referees actually took me all out to dinner to celebrate afterwards.
Oh, that's great.
But no, I could have teams, so the referees all got together. We all went out for dinner and like celebrated, and it was just there was a real sense of camaraderie between the referees. They were a really good support network. Once you got in, it took you some time to necessarily make the friends, but once you got the friends, there are people I see now when I'm just traveling to other athletes, and we'll go out to dinner. If I'm in a World Cup in Cancun with someone and I see some of the old friends I had from before, they'll still say hi, you can still go out to dinner. They're still friends. You've shared experiences, so they're friends for a long time. Be it an experience where you're stuck in Bulgaria because the bus breaks down on the way back to the airport, and there's 6 of you in this little minibus, and the thing breaks down, and you're just sitting on the side of the road for 3 hours. Everyone's like watching their flight times tick away.
Yes.
You've done it as a group, so you share those kind of experiences. When you've done nationally, I think for about properly for about 7-8 years, you share a lot of experience with these people over that time frame. So it's not like one instance, but it's silly things that mean nothing at the time. Sitting on the side of the road in Bulgaria waiting for another van to come and get us, and everyone watching their flight times tick away. At the time, it was just like an annoyance. But looking back, it was a really good bonding experience with those people, because you joke about it at the next event. Are we going to get to are we going to get to the airport safely, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Like the whole brother in arms thing, where you've got the war stories,
A little bit, yeah. I mean, there'd be events where, there was no coffee in the referees room for 3 days at the Worlds. You're like, oh my God, it's there's things like that from the World Championships in Linz, where there were, for some reason, coffee was in short supply for breakfast in the referees room in the morning. And it's just little silly things that you still, in Linz was, 13 years ago, and I still remember that today, So there's things that stick. Which mean probably not a lot to lots of people, but to you, it's like, oh, it's that story.
Mm-hmm. Well, and of all things to do to a referee, you don't want to short them on coffee.
Exactly. Can you imagine a nap with no coffee? Oh my God.
No. I think people would walk out in protest. In 2007, you were named as the vice chairman of the British Fencing Referee Committee. What were your duties in that position?
It was mainly trying to grow referee numbers in the UK and the standard. It was a little bit of one of these situations where you're last man standing when you get elected to some of these positions.
The only person who couldn't say no.
Yeah, a little bit. And it was interesting because British refereeing is very different to the US in the fact that, the US think we get paid badly. British fencing for a period of time just didn't pay referees. You just expected to do it as like a badge of honor almost.
Oh, wow.
To turn up to the events, so someday you may get an international gig. They don't have the same fee structure for events in the UK, so paying referees is much harder. And so it was very difficult to say to people or bring people into doing refereeing in the UK because there was no real benefit to you as an individual, except the chance of potentially going on international travel or doing it because you enjoy it. So a lot of it was trying to grow the number of referees as the sport was growing, looking at how we raised the standard of referees so that our events got better. It's one of the catch-22s. Fencing gets better to the referees, even if the referee getting better, so the fencing gets better. And that's one of the things we were trying to look at and see if we could find a solution to or a way around.
And in 2008, you became a member of British Fencing's board of directors. So it sounds like you couldn't say no one more time.
Yeah.
What sorts of changes or implementations did you help create during that time?
Well, that was the big upheaval time for British fencing in between 2008 and 12. Because of the way the funding streams worked in the run-up to the London Olympics, there was a lot of professionalisation of the sport or roles being created. There was a lot of politics at the time of removing people who had been, changing the roles of things like the president of British fencing change from being a little bit like the CEO of fencing to a point where it's an honorary title where you don't actually make any real decisions, you just represent British fencing in events. Mm-hmm. We introduced an independent chair to the board at that time. We changed the structure of the board. There was a lot of work done during that time. I don't think I was responsible for any of it or being the driving force behind any of it, but a lot of it happened while I was sitting on the board. Mm-hmm. A lot of it was driven by our funding partners and our need to... You have to pass governance to keep getting your money, basically, from UK sport. And so a lot of it meant we had to change things and do things to continue getting that money, especially the high-performance money. Right. So a lot of our high-performance budget was tied to what we were doing in that roles. And so to keep getting that money, we had to pass good governance. We had to make changes at committee levels. We had to make changes to personnel. We had to change things a lot to jump through the hoops to get that money. Now, there are people now who would look back and say, was that the best thing for British fencing? Because the money is now gone after Rio. Mm-hmm. And we took on a lot of staffing commitments and paid positions and stuff to get this governance done. There are people looking at it now and saying, well, the results, men's foil had medalists in 2004 before we had the money, and then didn't really change the position. I think Richard Cruz was fourth in 2004 and was fourth in 2016, and we put a lot of money into it in the middle. Yeah. What happened? So I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing for the sport, the changes that were made, but at the time they were necessary to justify the funding.
That makes me think, because of the London Olympics, what does Los Angeles have to look forward to when they host the Olympics? And what does U.S. fencing, what are they going to have to do when the Olympics come to our country? Did you get to experience any of that planning? I was still on the board in British fencing until 2011. And so we were already a long way into planning that. I mean, we held the Belfast World Championships as part of that. And that was an interesting event to run. The World Championships is an interesting beast for juniors and cadets. I mean, London itself and the sport, I think, benefited dramatically from holding the Olympics. I think it's a good thing for countries and cities to hold it if they're capable of doing it. I mean, London didn't have dramatic infrastructure changes because it's a big city. I'm sure LA won't. I mean, one of the things I'm sure LA will have to put in is like Beijing. They had Olympic-only traffic lanes where you could use only use that lane if you had Olympic credentials. Oh, wow.
Just to allow movement of athletes and officials around the city, which I imagine will cause carnage. Yeah. But for US fencing is actually in pretty good stead for what it would need to do. We have a lot of good FIU referees right now, a good young group of FIU referees who maybe their first chance to get experience with Olympics will be Los Angeles, because we have to give, from memory, I think it's 8. Host nation has to provide 8 referees across the weapons. Mm-hmm. That will give some people the chance to get a crack at the Olympics they may not otherwise get, because it's difficult to get the Olympics as a referee. It's once every 4 years and one per country. So, if you think of the number of good FIU referees US fencing currently has across all the weapons, and 2020 is one referee and 2024 is another, for a lot of these guys, Los Angeles will be the first chance for them to referee in Olympics. Mm-hmm. But from an infrastructure point of view, US fencing is pretty well set up, staff-wise, officials-wise, to contribute as much as they need to towards that event.
That's great. And you were a referee for the Olympic Games in Beijing, right?
Yeah, I refereed in 2008 in Beijing. Okay. And it's really a good experience.
What was it like to referee at the Olympics, and how were you selected for that position?
You basically have to commit a large chunk of your life for the previous 2 years to refereeing for the FIE. Okay. They basically say, do this event, you say, absolutely. I'd refereed a lot of world championships, senior and juniors between 2005 and 2008. I did both seniors and juniors and cadets in 2005. I did seniors in 2007. I did seniors in 2006. I think juniors in 2007. It was just a lot of refereeing. I mean, you give a lot of your time. You also have to do all the Grand Prix circuit refereeing. Mm-hmm. So on top of the 20 days they want for the World Championships, you then have a zonal event, plus you probably do 3 Grand Prix. So you're looking at probably close to 50 days of just refereeing for the FIE in a year.
Wow.
which is a lot of time. It's a commitment to do it.
Plus all
I'm not sure
and all that too.
Exactly. So there's just a lot of commitment to do it. You jump through all those hoops, and then basically you hope at the meeting where they select the referees, your name gets put on a whiteboard.
Wow.
And it's really no guarantees. So you are going to be one of 40, 50 referees they take to the Olympic Games. It's not, in fact, it's nowhere near that high, actually. It's probably closer to 30, and then the additional ones. You're maybe one of 8 to 12 in your weapon, and some of that is political. A lot of it is how do we get this person. I was very lucky that the president of British fencing at the time was on arbitrage, a man called Keith Smith, and I'm sure he helped me dramatically get on that list. Mm-hmm. He was very instrumental in pushing me forwards in my refereeing career. And so he'd helped me out a lot of the time going forwards. And I'm sure when it came to the time in that room, because he sits in the meeting, he would have done everything he could to make sure we had a British person there.
Right.
Because, it's all part of governing bodies called international influence. It's helpful to have people at levels in the sport to help push your country's interests.
Absolutely.
And so I would imagine that he was very helpful. I'd done quite a lot of events. I'd refereed world finals by that point, and I hadn't, made any huge mistakes. So I wasn't like couldn't be selected. And luck. I think a large part of it is also luck. I never planned on refereeing. I injured my knee in 99. And so as a result, 98, 99, as a result, I started refereeing. I started refereeing and coaching and managing because I couldn't compete anymore. I was just in the right place at the right time in a weapon where we didn't have many other British FIA referees at all in Sabre when I started. Being British at the time also was our fencing wasn't very good, so it meant I was always neutral. And so I could referee at a high level all the way up these events because I didn't have any conflicts.
Right.
It's harder for American referees now to do that because, especially in foil, the American foil team's so strong that you're never going to get a final.
Right.
And a junior and cadet, it's even stronger. So how do you get noticed as a foil referee? Mm-hmm. And it's great for the sport.
Yeah, our fencers just have to suck more, I guess.
It's kind of catch-22. You're really happy that US fencing's doing so well results-wise, but then if you're a referee trying to make your way up, even on the FIE stage, if your fencers are really good, you never get the chance to get pushed, which doesn't help you particularly. So right now in foil, I imagine it's very difficult because there were normally always an American in the 8 or at least in the 4 recently,
right.
Which means you can't work in the 8 or the 4. So you're going to stop at the 16 every time. And some of it is you've got to be memorable. So when they're sitting in that meeting room, this guy did a really good final at this event and it was great. Whereas if you always finish at the 16, you're one of lots of people. So, that makes it harder to get picked to do the Olympics. So I think, and some of it's also name recognition and people they know and trust. There's a large part of we don't want to take risks at the Olympics. So if you've been doing the last couple of seasons and been good, you stand a much better chance of being there than if you're just brand new that season, just because they don't, a lot of the time in the run-up to the Olympics, they'll use the same core group of referees for all the big events just to check they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But the experience itself was unbelievable because I went to the opening ceremony in Beijing. I wasn't really convinced I was going to go, but as I said earlier about the band of people you line, they're like, no, you've got to do it. You've got to come. And I was like, it's really hard. I've got a headache now. You've got to come. And it was absolutely awe-inspiring to sit in that stadium and watch the athletes walk in, watch a fencer I coached walk in with the British team. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And then also to kind of watch the drums when they started. It was unbelievable to watch the number of drummers they had. Just walk in and start banging on drums was just amazing.
Yeah.
The whole experience was really good. And we were there for about 8-9 days, and it was the whole thing was just different because your visa into the country was your Olympic credential. You were met at in the airport, whisked through security, whisked through. It was just, the officials didn't stay in the village, which was probably good because there was no security there for us to get in and out of the hotel, which was helpful. But having the village, it was really good fun. And I think anybody the chance to do it. I think it's what a lot of referees are striving for. A lot of referees are coming up and doing their FIA exams and wanting that experience. I think it is now much harder to get it than when I did it because I was one of very few referees in Britain, whereas now in the US, you're one of, to be honest, a very good group of FIA referees that are coming up. And so the chance of you get out of all that group is much slimmer.
That's interesting. I never thought about how if the fencers from your country are doing well, then your referees can't perform at the level that they want. I did never think about that catch-22. That was really interesting.
No, I mean, luckily, a lot to, but I mean, right now in men's foil and women's foil, I mean, right now in foil, the US is doing so well that just it's very difficult for those referees. I mean, épée and sabre, women's sabre historically, I mean, was very difficult because, you know, there was always Marielle or Becca or Darga or someone, or Ipti, someone making the top 8.
Right.
Men's sabre, now again, men's sabre, Eli and Darryl. So, you know, US fencing in general, the strength of the weapons and the strength of the teams it's good for the fencing in the country, but then maybe not quite so good for the referees.
Right. Okay, in 2011, you moved to the U.S. and because U.S. Fencing hired you as their high-performance director.
Yep.
Why did you decide to take a job in the United States?
Well, I coached everything I wanted to coach, I thought, in the UK. And I'd looked at this role before, actually. I looked at it before Beijing as well. And I thought it was the next step in what I wanted to do, because I thought I wanted to do high performance. I thought I wanted to work in the administration side much more than I did. And I think it was the next logical jump into the fencing world. The role and position was interesting at the time. It was a time when US Fencing was making a lot of changes. I mean, we went through a lot of executive directors around that time. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of power in coaches, and rightly so to a degree, because the coaches have been responsible for all the athlete development and athlete results up to that point. The organization in general was trying to change the way that was managed. Mm-hmm. A lot of it also is you end up having to say no, because you're basically the budget responsible person. So the coaches would come and say, can I do this? And you basically go, you don't have the money. And there was a lot of just like no, and a lot of like being the person that said no, and a lot of just like, just always saying no, basically. And you missed, what I missed most of it was you miss the athletes. Like when you're coaching, you see the athletes. When I was coaching the guy I got to the Olympics, I saw him as much as his parents did. Like he would train, 3-4 hours a day, all the time. And then all of a sudden you end up just being like a voice on the other phone saying no. And that's just, the pros to that job were outweighed by the cons. Mm-hmm. Like you end up saying to a lot of people for no real reason that the budget doesn't allow it. Right. I mean, the women's épée team in London did phenomenally well because their budget and money was continuously cut because no one believed that Ro Savadaro could get the medal he got and the team would get the medal they got. And so you're reallocating that money to other teams where you thought there was a better chance. And then, that was an amazing result for women's épée on a shoestring of a budget compared to some of the other weapons. Yes. And then some of the other weapons where you've put a lot of money and a lot of support and time, they don't do as well. And you're like, well, it's always a bit of a gamble and a bit of prediction. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in the role very long before I didn't really like the role, to be honest. So I didn't really accomplish a lot in the role. Mm-hmm. In some regards, US Fencing doesn't have a national training center. It doesn't really have national squads all training together. So a lot of the way high performance is done in other countries doesn't apply in the US. A lot of athletes train with their individual coaches in individual clubs around the country. Mm-hmm. And so there isn't a need or a design for a nationalized training plan or nationalized training structure. Mm-hmm. So the role is basically administrative. The role is basically allocating budgets, tracking performance of staff and coaches, organizing logistics for travel to team. And that was a role that was interesting, but it wasn't the role necessarily I wanted. Mm-hmm. And more than anything else, I missed the athletes. I missed the day-to-day interaction with athletes, the seeing them develop and get better. And so it was the right job at the time, but probably the wrong. I don't think I would go back to that kind of role again. I like the balance I have now in the roles I have now. Yes. As you understand. Mm-hmm.
Well, and we'll get to your role in your club in just a little bit. But I'm really curious about, you alluded to this a little bit with the national team concept, but compare and contrast the organizations of British fencing and U.S. fencing. Like, what does each do well, and how could each improve?
The U.S. is very good in the way it's currently supporting athletes and growing. It's difficult to put it in terms because British fencing took a model in high performance where they were going to centralize everything with a high performance director and national coaches in one training center in London. If you didn't become part of that training center, you couldn't be on the national teams. And they do a thing where it's talent identification in their pathways where they try and identify the talented athletes and give them selection ahead of other athletes. One of the things that US does so well is it selects the people at the top of the rankings, regardless of, at the end of the day, the top 4 go. There is no politics involved or wiggle room or I like this person more than this person. At the end of the day, when you're selecting the team for the Worlds or the Zonals or Olympics, the top 4 get to go. And so the athletes and coaches who are training athletes know I have to get in my athlete into the top 4 in the rankings and they get to go. Whereas in some countries, but it's one of them where you have what they were called pathway athletes back in the day. They could be selected for events even when they didn't, ahead of people who were higher in the rankings. They could still be selected. And the selection criteria for those countries was written so that you could select the athletes on the pathway ahead of athletes ranked higher. And I think that was a problem. And one of the things I really like about the US is it is very clear. I mean, the athlete handbook obviously is a monstrous piece, but the actual rankings and structure for doing that is very clear. The rankings and selection for international trips is clear. You make the top 20 or you take the top 12, you get to go. So I think US fencing does that very, very well. I think British fencing does very well in running the sport on a shoestring of a budget it doesn't have the competition structure and the income that US fencing has from its domestic events to add additional funding. It has to rely on the membership fees, which are, again, less than US fencing, to support its operations. And it does that very well on a limited budget of limited staff. And some of that's cultural. British fencing can't suddenly go an event costs £120 when 2 weeks costs £20. Right. The factors of charges for the events are very different. The standard of the events in the US are much higher. So you're getting what you pay for. So, US fencing has much better professional referees. It has it has 8 video replay strips in the NACs. You have video replay from the 16. It has a much more professional setup for national events than British fencing does. British fencing does is fighting the cultural change that we charge. I can't remember what a NAC costs now, like $170, $190 something, 120 registration fee, $50 event fee or something. Fencing cost when I left, mainly now 5 years ago, like £20 to enter an event. That's incredible. So about factors of 10 is the difference in entry fees. People have been tried to change things and tried to do things, but it's market forces. And with some of the changes to high performance, British fencing lost some of the older fencers who were doing it for fun because they could no longer travel or do other things because they weren't on the pathway scheme. So that was difficult. But I think US fencing does really well. I mean, national events, as much as we moan about them and complain about them, they put on events on a bigger scale than anywhere else in the world, and they run them pretty efficiently for what they are, with a great setup, with the final strip and the video replays and the way they do that. And they're doing very well in supporting the coaches and athletes who do the international scene. I mean, the funding for the athletes that comes from the USSC is good, but US fencing, supports them and does things as well. And they do that very well. And I think with any organization, and you say British fencing or US fencing, they're always where we go, actually, we're really good whole argument is we're really good if we paid the referees more. I mean, I hear it all the time. Don't disagree, but we have to get that money from somewhere. And British fencing, I'm sure, would love to be able to say the same thing, but we want to run better events. We need the money from somewhere. Right. And so it's a case of, with the resources they have, both do as well as they can. I mean, if British fencing had 10 times the resources because they were charging 10 times for their national events and everyone was prepared to pay it, I'm sure they would do much, much better with certain athletes. For example, US fencing funds the top 4 athletes in every weapon to travel and do all that stuff. And they have a relatively decent international high-performance budget on top of the USSC money. British fencing doesn't. It doesn't have the national events to generate in excess of, $1 million of income. So they run on sheet. The athletes, to a degree, fund themselves. Right. If they're not one of that few. And so it's just a very different, it's difficult to contrast and compare them just because they're in such different places from a financial standpoint, a financial model. Okay. I think British fencing does what they have. I think US fencing actually does very well what they have. I'm sure both would say they could do even better if they had another, $1 million each.
Well, of course. Money fixes everything, right? Well, I'm really curious how a British guy became the director of the Boston Fencing Club. Which is, I think, the oldest fencing club in the U.S. So how did you step into that position of leadership?
By accident, to be honest. I came in originally, I was over here, I quit the US fencing high-performance job. I was in Boston. I met my wife, who is now my wife, so I was hanging out in Boston. I was coaching a British girl that came over because she was still trying for 2012. And so I was in the area and I was training Boston Fencing Club. And they asked me to come on and coach the Sabre program because it didn't really exist. I mean, it existed, but not really existed at the time. It was much more for an FA club. And I said, yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. I need a job.
Yes.
And then over time, the administration, and I met the board of directors. It's actually a non-for-profit organization. So we have a board of directors. So everything goes through them. And they have monthly meetings and we discuss, what we're doing, where it's going. And I went to a couple of those meetings and I got on well with the board and really just kind of fell into put some bits and pieces of it and then bits and pieces more. And then would I do this? And would I do that? And in the end, it ended up that I was just suddenly the director of operations. And it was it's a role I really enjoy. It's a really nice environment. It's a good club. But I really just honestly fell into it. It wasn't some master scheme. Again, my inability to say no to some things, I think, helps me in that regard. And that's been a good experience for me. And the club, I really enjoy working for a non-for-profit, a board of directors. I like that the onus isn't on one person making, high six-figure salaries. It's about growing the sport in the area, trying to keep our costs to a point where we're still paying rent, but we're not extorting the people who are the club. And so that was really good. But I got into the job pretty much purely by luck.
What changes have happened to BFC since you've been there? Either because of you or like they were just going to happen anyway?
We've had quite a lot, actually. We moved. We had to move. Our lease was up. So I understand the problem you have moving houses. I moved to fencing club. And we had to find a new facility. And we were looking around. And that was an 18-month process to try and find a facility because we decided we wanted to go bigger. Mm-hmm. In parts, we run a lot of divisional and regional events out of the building. And so we went bigger. It was also that we were running on a 10 club and it was really running out of space for what we were doing. And so we moved the club. We've got into partnership with a nearby high school who now do all their fencing out of the club. We've had partnerships with some of the colleges in the area, so they do their fencing out of the club. But we've really just taken the business models of the club. So bits and pieces have been changed to make it run a little bit more like a business in some regards. Like we have an HR officer, we have a HR and compliance officer. A lot of our staff are salaried rather than paid as they give lessons. We salary all our staff, which means we have responsible for, checking their hours, checking who's giving lessons, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just a lot of it is just was tweaking little bits here and there to make differences. I mean, staff come and go. We've lost some staff. We gained some staff. We have 2 staff retiring at the end of this year who will be missed. I think they will be happy to be done. I mean, they will be missed. And then we'll have to look for new staff again. So it's bits and pieces like that. It's coming in and bringing in some procedures on some things that we have to do because we're a non-for-profit to make sure that we're going through all our compliance issues and making sure we're doing things the right way. And that's it, really. There's nothing dramatic changes-wise. It's just little changes that we think will improve the ability, improve the club and improve the way it's run. Sometimes you take, with all kinds of things, sometimes you take one step forwards to find out, that wasn't a good idea. Let's go back and try again.
Right.
And we do that a little bit, especially with things like website software. We've changed our website software like 3 times at this point. Each time you think, this will be the one. This will be the perfect solution. But it's just managing that and managing the staff. We have quite a big staff, and we have front desk staff and coaches, and we have external coaches who just come in to do lessons. And the managing of it is just really the part, I suppose.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. And you're right, it would take more than just one person to be able to manage all of that. Let's talk a little bit about your involvement in the development of Sabre referees here in the U.S. You're the head Sabre ref at many NACs, and you work on the domestic development of the Referees Commission. So Tell us about the process of managing the Sabre cadre at a NAC and what you have done to improve the U.S. domestic Sabre cadre.
Well, I think one of the key things when I started this process was there was an element of the Sabre cadre that needed to feel they were supported. And what I mean by that is, historically, the attrition rate in the Sabre refereeing cadre has been high. We lost a lot of referees. The atmosphere wasn't good. It was felt the coaches could influence the referees' progression and what they were doing and would shout them a lot. There was a lot of aggression that way. I've tried very hard to reduce that level of influence. that the referees understand that there are, effectively senior referees and mentors in that program who can look after them. But just because a coach complains to someone, they're not going to get pulled from refereeing, or they're not going to never get hired again, or all the things that in the past that they felt was hanging over their heads. We've tried very hard with the information of some of the, we use a Facebook group, a closed group, to try and help educate referees in a way of saying, okay, it's a safe space to talk about calls. You can put up a video that you're not sure of, or video you want answers to, and ask the group. We have senior referees in there that give their opinion. And a lot of it at the beginning was about trying to get a consistency so that the calls would go the same way, regardless of which referee you got in front of you on the strip, and to help some of the referees understand why they were getting given that way. I mean, with everything in refereeing, it's open to interpretation and individual preferences. And one of the things I've got to work on in the next season is making sure that the voices in the group who contribute can have differing opinions. Like we looked at a touch recently, and I looked at one recently, where people disagree. And it's not a bad thing that there's disagreement. It's a good thing. But for the young guys coming up, they've got to be able to make that call in a consistent way that they're comfortable with. So the big part has been consistency and saying, okay, you're going to give that. And the one at Sabre at the moment is always attack, counter-attack in the box, or attack in prep, or old school tempo. What's what? It's 2 steps lunge over, 1 step lunge better, or 1 step lunge. And that's the continuous one we're talking with at the moment. The next one's going to be malparried, because that's the latest one that's come in. Or in the past, it was if it's attack no. If the front foot lands, is it attack no? Does the arm keep going? And different people have very different opinions on that one. Myself and another referee, Ivan Lee, we argue about that pretty regularly, openly and in the closed group. But the attacking counter-attack is one now, and it's important they have a safe space where they can go and talk about actions they've given. There's been too much recently on social media of people posting these calls and going, oh, isn't this referee atrocious? And a lot of the time it's at a bad angle, and you're not a referee, and it's not easy always to stand out there in the middle of the strip and give the touch you think is right, knowing that half the room is going to be angry with you and half the room is going to be happy. That's just the way it works. Right. And so then to have it dragged up again with people who are often just friends of the person who's posting it going, yeah, that's awful, doesn't help. So a lot of it is also a little bit defending those referees in public. And even if they're wrong to a degree, defending them in public, and if they're wrong, saying, look, this is why I think you should have given this touch this way, and making sure that they feel supported at an act. But a lot of it is just getting that consistent call so that we're saying, look, okay, this is why we're giving this. This is the way we would like to see it given. And then out they go. The general atmosphere among the referee cadre, as far as I'm aware, in the Sabre world is better. Some of the coaches are very angry about it because they no longer have the influence they once had. Wow. But in general, the domestic events have run smoother, I think, in the last year and a half than they have before. And the referees, I think, feel more supported. And so that's been the big goal. We're not going to get, we need to grow the Sabre cadre by about another 10 to 12 athletes. 10 to 12 referees, because we still have a very small, limited number of good Sabre referees in the US. I mean, it's a good number, and the ones we have are good, but we still need about another 12 because the events are getting bigger and the days are getting longer. And so part of it is going to be training people to get better at that and then trying to work out. And that's all on the NAC side. So the domestic development side is how we bridge the gap between regional referees to national level. I'm still mainly involved in the national level on that with the seminars and mentorship programs. And there's going to be a lot of news coming out around Summer Nationals with programs being rolled out for next season. The committee actually has been working really well. I have to give a lot of credit to Pat Webster. He has the patience of a saint sometimes on our committee calls. He's much better than me. But there are a lot of people, all who have the best interest of fencing refereeing at heart. We don't always agree on how we should get to where we're going, but we all agree we should get there. And the referee committee there is working on how do we develop some of the bridges between having a really good local regional referee and having them move up to NACs. How do we grow the number of regional referees? Because the same problem we have at NACs where the big events are getting bigger is the same problem we're having at regions where the events in general are getting bigger. So we need more referees even at regional levels. So how do we do that? But a lot of those people have ideas and a lot of them have questions on it. And I think there'll be a lot of answers coming out around Summer Nationals about some of the programs we're doing. So that'll be interesting.
This past fencing season, there has been an increasing number of reports of sexual harassment aimed at female refs. What is being done or what could be done to improve this? And I think it's probably just because the country in general is aware of this kind of situation, and fewer people are willing to just let the status quo remain. And so I'm pretty sure that that's why there's the increase. But what is U.S. fencing, or what are you as one of the main Sabre refs doing to help this situation?
I mean, I think you're right, Kate. I think one of the reasons we're hearing a lot more about it is because it's always existed, but I think people are much more willing to come forward and say so now. I think there are examples recently of things that have happened that in the past would have happened and no one would have said anything. I don't think it made them right in the past. We have to be better at being quicker to respond to some of these allegations or instances that we know happen. And the punishments from US fencing have to come down to people who do it. I mean, I don't think it's just within the referee cadre. I think female referees in general, even when they travel internationally, can feel that some of the US like coaches who travel, other people sexually harass them. I think we have to be very careful that anybody in a position of power in any scenario can't do things in a way that would make people feel uncomfortable. I think there are lots of scenarios whereby we should have a better possible. I mean, Sam, chair of the referees commission, came out recently with an email to all the referees about how to report and all these things, and I think that's good. But I don't think it would be wrong for US fencing for a period of time to have an HR or compliance officer or someone at NACs as that role. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's enough going on now with not even just sexual harassment, but across the board. I don't think it needs to be that. I think there are scenarios in the past where referees have felt bullied by coaches or by, male coach bullying a male referee. Right. I think there are enough instances that, have been issues in the past, are still issues, and we should have a reporting system that is quick. I think there's nothing that says we can't have a reporting system at the NAC where X happens at the NAC. There is someone you can walk up to the next day and say, this happened, I feel uncomfortable because of these reasons. Mm-hmm. And that person can then feed that information back to the relevant people. So that, say it's a sexual harassment claim between two referees, well, you don't want to then pair that female referee with that male referee the next day on a pool. Exactly. But if you don't know, you may quite and blindly just carry on with what you're doing assigning wise, not knowing that there's this issue.
Absolutely. And
I don't think it should necessarily be up to the female referee to have to go to the assigner and say, I don't want to be paired with this person because of this. I think they might need, in a lot of organizations, the ability to go and just tell one person who then has the responsibility of devolving that information or not, depending if the female referee wants it devolved. I mean, it's, we have the OEO officers and Title IX coordinators in colleges who get everything given to them, if you like, and they then filter out what gets back to the relevant coach or relevant member of staff to deal with it. And I think US fencing at some point will have to, and I know they're using the Centre of Safe Sport as their catch-all net at the moment, but I think it would be sensible possibly going forwards for either the referee commission to have a compliance officer. We used to have an ethics subcommittee, I believe, which got dissolved to the referees committee. I'm not sure what happened there. But I think that would be a good step in helping that. I think the more times it's reported and the more actions we take, the less it's acceptable, the more people will step up, the more times it will give. I think so. I would hope that it's one of these things that can be driven out of the sport. Because when I think one of the bad things, and I think it's not just about domestic stuff, I think some of it happens overseas, and that's even worse, because then you're a female referee overseas on your own, you feel very isolated. So I think we need a support network there as well. Mm-hmm. And I think those things I think would be a good starting point to try to deal with the issues that to a degree have just laid dormant for a long time. It's not new. The concept of sexual harassment of female referees, it's happened in the FIE for a long time. And I think that's another area that, it's good that we're dealing with it in US fencing, but I think as a sport, because the number of female referees has been low historically, US fencing probably has a much better ratio of female to male referees than any other country. I think it's something they'll come up against even when they go up from US fencing into the FIE levels, because you're one girl with 12 guys. And, right. Ending it, but they behave like 12 frat boys on party tour, and that sometimes is appropriate, and that sometimes needs to be dealt with. Yeah. But if we start doing it in US fencing, at least that's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your thoughts on that. We'll finish up this interview with a mixture of famous questions from James Lipton and Marcel Proust. What is your favorite word?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
What is your least favorite word?
Crack.
Crack?
Crack. Okay. Yeah. Ugh.
What sound or noise do you love?
Champagne corks popping.
Nice. What sound or noise do you hate?
Airport announcements.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. No idea. Have to move on that one.
All right. What profession would you not like to do?
Any 9 to 5 job. Any job where I have to be in the office from 9 till 5.
Where would you like to live?
I really like Boston. It reminds me of home, and it's on the East Coast. I know that my wife would like me to say California or San Diego.
Okay. What do you value most in your friends?
Loyalty.
Who is your hero?
Oh, wow. No, oof. That's a good question. No idea. I don't know who my hero is. Someone I look up to. Don't know.
And
I think when I was a kid, I would have had heroes. I'm not sure I still have heroes. I think the cynic side of David has taken over when it comes to heroes.
Okay.
So I'm not past that one.
And what is your motto?
Oh, for years it was on my signal, unleash Al.
That's great. That's great. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me this morning. Really appreciate your insights, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you just a little bit better.
No problems, Kate. Thanks for having me on. It's been really good fun.
Excellent. See you at the next tournament.
Will do. Thanks. Bye.
Big thank you once again to my friend and teammate Tony Escueda, who edits all of these interviews and who has produced all the music for this podcast. Thank you as well to my executive producer and husband, David Sierra, who always proofreads my questions and gives me ideas for new interviews. Big thank you to all of you listeners out there who have been so supportive and who keep asking me for more episodes. Please email me at sabercoachkate@gmail.com if you have any ideas for interviews or questions you'd like me to ask people. You can also visit my blog at sabercoachkate.wordpress.com for articles about fencing in general, or also a place to download all of these episodes in case you don't have access to iTunes. You can find this podcast, of course, on iTunes, and you can also access every episode on my new Saber Coach Kate podcast YouTube channel. I hope you can check it out.